Over the weeks, I've been building my own custom shop Telecaster style guitar, and something I hope will equal the Fender Custom Shop guitars that I've got here in the studio, but at a much lower cost and produced using fairly basic tools. Now in part 1 I took a look at the foundation of any guitar project, and that's the body and the neck choices available and the reasons why I made the choices that I did. Now in part 2 was sealing, priming, first coat neck lacquer stage and Danish oil for the fretboard. Now it's important to get untreated wood finishes sealed within a very short time of purchase due to the risk of moisture ingress, especially in a humid or damp environment. In part 3 was the colour coat, placing decals on the headstock and final coats of amber lacquer. In part 4, the accessories, hardware and electronics, along with the process of aging chrome and nickel. In part 5 I prepared the headstock, neck and fingerboard for that relic custom shop look and feel. In part 6 it was time to relic the body, apply conductor paint to the cavities and a final clear coat lacquer and set aside to dry out. In part 7 the neck and the headstock, a final sand, cut and polish, and onto drilling all the necessary holes and fitting accessories. In this video, it's now time for the body to get that same sand, cut and polish treatment, followed by lacquer checking or finish cracking, along with drilling and fitting all the accessories. Hello viewer, my name's Stu. Please do check out the rest of my channel as it covers my return journey back to playing and recording guitar after a 40-year break. So if you enjoy the content, please do think about subscribing, click the bell for notifications, like, share, and do comment below. All this really helps the channel, and it's always good to hear your stories and experiences. So a big thank you for those who take time to share with others and share with me. So in part 8 of my custom guitar build project video series, I never thought I was going to get this video done this week, because I've been up to my eyes, but we're moving along and coming up. Number 1, it's time to finish the guitar body, a sand, cut and polish. Number 2, cracking or lacquer checking the finish. Number 3, drilling holes and fitting accessories. And number 4, a conclusion, final thoughts. So, without further ado, number 1. Now, if you haven't watched parts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 and 7 and you're thinking about building your own parts caster style guitar, I do encourage you to check those out. You should find those videos very helpful. And for those new to relicking and the very different opinions voiced on the topic, do check out the video I did on that. It's been 4 weeks since the guitar body was spray painted with its final coats of nitrocellulose clear coat lacquer, and the lacquer clear coat is now hard enough for me to sand, cut and polish and to finish with a lacquer checking effect. Now once again, it's important to be patient, never make the mistake of sanding nitrocellulose lacquers too quickly, especially when it's been done with spray cans. Now before I begin, I have filled and taped off areas where there are holes, as I'll be using the wet and dry sanding method, and you don't really want water getting into those exposed timber areas, as it will cause it to swell and get under the paintwork. Now just like the neck and headstock in the last video, on inspection of the lacquer finish, it's actually looking very good, so I'm going to be going easy with the sanding. To begin, I give the back of the body a light sand with 2000 grit on a rubber block to see how that works out. Using slightly warm water with a touch of soapy liquid and a good quality wet and dry sandpaper, I methodically just move backwards and forwards across the surface of the body. Now the wet and dry method does help to stop clogging of sanded material collecting on the paper, but it should be checked regularly. I don't want to inadvertently add deep scratches to the finish. It's important to be careful of going onto the curved edges, as the lacquer is thinner there. Those areas are really best done gently by hand. After a wipe down, I move to 3000 grit and again just gently working my way around the back body of the guitar. Here I move up to a 5000 grit. Now if you're going to be cutting and polishing with a drill buffing attachment, then I'd say this is not really needed, but it does make that final cut and polish easier to achieve. For this task, I'm using Meguiar's Mirror Glaze Ultra Cut Compound 105 and a set of buffer sponges that attach to my cordless drill. I buff the back body surface, moving regularly back and forth, not too much pressure needed. Now it's worth taking note, this is a very messy job, and wait till you see the end of this section, and I'm wishing I had done this in the garage. At least I had an old pair of jeans on. Once finished and wiping off with a clean cloth, it's time for the Meguiar's Mirror Glaze Ultra Finishing Polishing Compound 205, and using a different buffer sponge, I do the same again. A final buff is done with a soft buffing pad, taking care not to dig into the finish. Now after inspection in the light, I decide to do another pass of both the Ultra Cut the finishing polish and a final soft pad buff to get that mirror glaze finish. Now I will say I'm not looking for a flawless glassy finish, as this is a relic style guitar, but I certainly don't want any orange peel on the finish, as that would suggest a low standard spray job. So having gained confidence doing the back of the guitar body, it's time to do the same treatment for the front. Same process, taking my time methodically, working through the sandpaper grades. Now I will say, while the overall clear coat finish is very good here, there were very little areas of orange peel, and that required me to use 1200 grit wet and dry to sand that out, moving up to 2000, then 3000, and then finally 5000 grit. Now once again, I went through 2 passes with the cutting and polishing compounds, finishing with the soft buffing pad. Now on inspection, I noticed that I still had little areas of orange peel, and again I carefully sanded those out with 2000 wet and dry, and again went through 2 passes of cutting and polishing compound. Now again, it all depends on what you're trying to achieve here. This is a relic style guitar. I want a professional finish, but I don't want it looking too highly finished off and polished. Otherwise this guitar is going to look a little bit odd. It won't look as though it's been a well-used guitar. Of course, if you're not doing a relic guitar, then you would be looking to do the very best finish that you can achieve. And for what I'm doing, it's now looking really nice. The sides of the guitar body were as perfect as you can get when spraying, and so no sanding was required. But I did do 2 very slow, methodical passes of cutting and polishing compounds, and all in all, it's looking very nice and it feels really good to the touch. So taking a wider viewpoint of the workbench reveals just some of the mess created by using the drill method. And while yes, you could do this all by hand, it would take you a lot longer to do this. And this actually took me around about 4 hours. So next up, number 2. Now it's time for the lacquer checking. Using a hairdryer, I heat up the rear edge of the back of the body to begin. This is a good place to start out, as it's not an obvious area on show, but it's certainly an area that would show wear and tear. Now without heating the nitro lacquer too much, I then take a can of compressed air, turning it upside down, which will create the coldest air. I then blast the heated surface. Now I do this process a couple of times and just leave it to see if any interaction begins. Now to begin with, I'm just going slowly because I'm feeling my way along in regard to how this process is working with my clear coat lacquer. Now at this point, you the viewer, you will not see what's happening because it is very subtle and it depends on what angle you look at this and in what kind of light. So now I can see that just taking a very slow, careful approach with this method is not required, and I begin to blast the body with freezing cold spray and just leave it to do its work. The nitro is definitely cracking, but it is very subtle. Now here I angle the body in direct light so you can at least see some aspect of the cracking. But looking at this through the camera, it really does not actually do this justice. It actually looks a lot nicer than this. So I've actually gone through 4 cans of compressed air, and I'm happy enough with what I've done over most of the body, the back of the body, the front of the body, and some of the areas of the sides. In time, this nitro will begin to crack all on its own, so I'm not really looking to get a completed look, so to speak. I'm quite happy with a subtle effect and just allowing the guitar to age gracefully on its own, and it will do that. To get a more extreme look, there are different ways to check lacquer. At first I was going to put this into a friend's deep freezer, a technique that is common to do. However, depending on various factors, you may need to keep a regular eye on what's going on in case things start cracking in a way, well, you might not be happy with. Other folks, they use a sharp cutting blade method, whereby you literally take a sharp blade and score the lines into the lacquer finish, usually using a picture of a genuine lacquer check guitar as a guide. Now, I would say that technique, it's not for the faint-hearted, although when done really well, it does look very convincing. Now, with all the holes unplugged and all the tape removed, it's now time to drill holes and fit accessories. Number 3. Like the neck, when it comes to drilling holes, care needs to be taken, and always check and double check before commencing to drill a hole. I use a little bit of wax on the threads of screws, as this helps the screw to go into the wood a little bit easier. First of all, just to get this part out of the way, I fit the string-through ferrules on the back of the body, and using a rubber mallet and a piece of wood to protect the ferrule facing, these are press fit into the line of holes which were already pre-drilled. You might notice here actually, here is what happens when using wet and dry paper. Here's a good example where the water has actually gone into the wood and caused a bit of swelling and gone under the paintwork a little bit. Now at the end of the day, I don't mind. For me, it's just part of damage and wear and tear. So I'm okay with it. But if you were going to be doing a guitar where you wanted a really perfect finish, this is what you need to avoid. Now a couple more small items to take care of is to drill and fit the guitar strap buttons, and I'm simply following a traditional Telecaster positioning setup. Always measuring and using tape on the drill bit to avoid drilling too deep. The jack socket is next, which is a replacement part to the original Fender vintage setup and much easier to fit. Placing the item firmly, I drill 2 pilot holes that will hold the plate in. Now, before actually attaching, I need to solder the 2 wires for the Switchcraft jack. And here I'm using the vintage wire that I purchased, soldering onto the prongs. Now the black wire, this is the ground, goes on to the sleeve prong. That's the one that is part of the very long prong, while the white or hot wire is connected to the other short prong, and that is insulated from the larger long one. Once soldered, the wires are gently braided together, feeding into the control cavity and affixing the jack socket to the jack plate which I screw back into the body. I'll cut the wire to length when I'm ready to affix the control plate. Now I'm going to be coming back to this because I ended up with an earthing problem, so keep watching. Now it's time to refit the neck, which is ready to go from the last video, because I'll need to align a number of parts all at the same time to make sure of proper placement and alignment. The body comes with pre-piloted indents for the Fender Telecaster bridge plate, making life very much easier, and that is what I will fix in place first. At this point I'm only using 2 screws to attach the plate just to help me place the pick guard, as it will be coming off again. In regard to the pick guard, I took some 7000 grit paper and just took off that glossy shine without any noticeable scratching. With the pick guard and control plate now positioned and all aligned correctly, I pilot hole the control plate screw holes. Next up, the pick guard, once again pilot hole positions made before removing the guard to drill the required screw fixing depth and then affix the guard into position. Now care must be taken not to crack the guard by over tightening the screws. Once done, these parts need to come off again, as I now need to prepare the pickups. The vintage style pickups use rubber grommets and screws as seen here. With the bridge pickup in place on the plate, I then position the neck pickup, feeding the wires through the body cavity hole. Now this is a little tricky. The wires are a tight fit, but all in all the pickup is also a tight fit, meaning getting it into the right position is fairly easy. You do have to take care with the wires. You don't want to break them off the pickup. With the control panel screwed back into position, I then use the pick guard to check the pickup's placement. This is a good time to set the pickup height. Here you see a measurement taken from my Fender Custom Shop 61 Telecaster, and I'll use that as my reference. And this is just a quick position setup. The actual setup comes later when all the parts are in place and tested. It's now time to solder all the wiring in accordance with one of Fender's wiring diagrams. It's important to make sure you have enough free wire to be able to lift aside the control panel and back bridge plate pickup. You don't need lots of free wire, but you definitely don't want to cut wires too short, or it will be a real pain putting things together, or if you want to do any future alterations. Now, an important thing to remember, if using electrical paint in the cavities, then be careful of shorts. And I had that problem at the jack socket, so I needed to bend the prongs in a bit more, and I needed to put insulation tape around the bare prongs just for added measure, and this did the trick. Once the soldering is completed, it's time to test the controls by plugging into an amplifier and testing the neck pickup position, volume and tone. The middle position, volume and tone. And then making sure it's dead when in the bridge position. And then same again for the bridge pickup. Now carefully affixing the control plate into position. Just again remember, you do not want any bare contact on that electrical paint. In regard to the earth wiring that goes under the bridge plate, you can see here I put a little nip into the body just to help hold the earth wire before I finally screw the bridge plate down, which simply compresses onto that wire, holding it in place. And now placing the guard, again taking care not to over tighten the pick guard screws to avoid cracking. And after checking again that all is working well, the last items to be fitted are the control knobs, tone and volume, followed by the top hat switch, and finally I attached the 3 brass compensated go-to bridge saddles. Now these are just generally positioned because we need to wait for the next video in the series. And number 4, conclusion. Final thoughts. So in part 9, with the guitar build now complete, there is, however, still a few things to take care of. And in the next video, I'll be putting on a set of strings that I hope will be a good fit for the Texas Special pickups, and on to set up all the aspects of the guitar. It's looking very nice, but it's an expensive, time-consuming paperweight if it doesn't play well. You know, so often you see these adverts for cheap guitar kits, which can be, I think, quite misleading to those new to guitar construction. If you were under the impression that it's just a case of bolting things together. No, it certainly is not. Even a very expensive parts caster style guitar that has a poor setup, it's not pleasant to play or listen to. So next video, finishing off the build and a top to bottom setup. It's not difficult to do, but like anything else in life worth doing, a little education and a smattering of patience, and you're good to go. Please do think about subscribing, hit the bell to get notified for part 9, like and share, and as always, it really does help this channel out. Do check out my channel playlists, which cover my journey back to playing and recording guitar after that 40-year break, and lots of equipment reviews as I seek out the gear that I use in recording. I'm sure you'll find some of those interesting. So whether you're a newcomer, an ongoing player, or like me, just an old hand returning to guitar playing, I always take time to engage with folks who take time to comment. So until next time, the journey continues, and I look forward to the final video on this guitar build. You take care.